Welcome. It is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel as we try to build this thing up. Packers, Eagles. Final thoughts. Last video on this channel before kickoff, 3:30 p.m. Sunday on Fox. If you want to and you haven't already, please check out the videos I had this week previewing different angles of this matchup as well. We did a first look, a first glance, talked about in another video how the Packers can beat the Eagles. This is final thoughts where we really cement things in and look over some of the other numbers and things that could factor into deciding really who wins this game and advances to the divisional round. Had you told Green Bay fans, and I'm sure the Packers too as a team, had you said at the beginning of the year, Green Bay makes the playoffs this season, most just say, yeah, sure, yep, great, right? Like, you want to ask the follow-up questions of, well, did they win the division? Are they a wild card? If they're a wild card, what seed are they? But at its root, if you could have just told Green Bay fans, hey, you're going to make the playoffs this year, I think most are happy with that. And most are, I don't know if I want to use the word content, but most are excited about just getting that ticket to the dance. Got it last year as the 7 seed, took out the 2 seed Dallas Cowboys. We all know what happened after that in Santa Clara the week following. And so there was an expected jump this year. They got the jump in terms of 2 more wins in the regular season, right? Was it 2 more than last year? But did you see enough of a jump with the offense? With the defense under first-year defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley, I think the defense has clearly taken a jump, in my opinion. The offense with the running game, and Josh Jacobs certainly has as well. We can get into the passing game down the road here in this video. But at its core, if you would have just said to Packer fans, you're going to make the playoffs. You're going to have a shot. You're going to have, if you really want to slice it up, you're going to have a 1-in-14 shot because there's 14 teams that get invited to the ball, and Green Bay is one of them. Now, how it came to fruition and where they are entering this matchup against Philadelphia, whether or not Packer fans would have been thrilled with that, obviously you're in, but you got the last ticket, you're the 7 seed, and you have a daunting task in front of you heading to Philadelphia to take on Jalen Hurts and the Eagles. And so it's sort of a balancing act. You're glad you're in. Were you expecting a little bit more? Is there meat left on the bone for what your expectations were for the Packers in the regular season entering this year? All that matters at this point, because you can't go back and change anything, they've got a shot. They're in. And they can lay down the cards on the table Sunday, 3:30 against Philadelphia. The aforementioned Jalen Hurts returned to practice on Wednesday. I think many believed, obviously the odds makers did, sort of a foregone conclusion that he would be back on Sunday. I don't know if he's fully cleared concussion protocol just because he's returned to practice on Wednesday. That's like one of the check marks, but it's not the final check mark. Has to be cleared to take contact, which I doubt he was doing on Wednesday in practice for Philadelphia. But Jalen Hurts back at practice, would fully expect him to be QB1 under center for the Eagles. He will have not put on the pads and the helmet, and I think 22 or 23 days it is, from the last time he played and suffered the concussion to this Sunday against Green Bay, again, assuming he is the guy under center for Nick Sirianni and company. And keep this in mind, even with Hurts, or if it were to be Kenny Pickett, which I don't think it will be, this team leans on the run. The big difference is that it leans on the run even more with Jalen Hurts because he's one of those rushers. No team in the NFL averaged fewer pass attempts per game this year than the Eagles. They were 32nd in pass attempts per game. It should then come as no surprise that no team averaged more rush attempts per game this season than the Philadelphia Eagles. That's spearheaded by Saquon Barkley, but includes Jalen Hurts as well. Now, Green Bay finished top 5 in opposing QB yards per carry. They did a great job of bottling Jalen Hurts up in week 1. Again, I don't draw much from that game. It was so long ago. But they did hold Hurts to 13 carries for 33 yards. And if you look at some of the other mobile quarterbacks Green Bay faced this year, in many of those occasions, they went to much more of a contain on the defensive edge and tried to set the edge so the quarterbacks couldn't break free. Guys like Anthony Richardson, when they played the Colts, couldn't get free. Kyler Murray, when they played Arizona. And there's other instances as well for the Packers. And they did a good job of not letting some of the more mobile quarterbacks in the NFL beat them with their legs. Will that work this time around against Philadelphia, or does Jeff Hafley need to call for a changeup or maybe tweak some things? We'll get into that in a few minutes. But Green Bay did a great job of neutralizing the mobile quarterbacks that they faced throughout the year. Top 5 in QB yards per carry. Getting Quay Walker back as a man in the middle and perhaps tag teaming him with Edgerrin Cooper, because I believe Quay Walker, if he returns on Sunday for the Packers, does not mean that Edgerrin Cooper gets his snaps sliced into and decreased. I think getting Quay Walker back and pairing him with Edgerrin Cooper could be the golden ticket for Green Bay's defense and trying to limit, contain in some aspects Saquon Barkley in this Philadelphia ground game. I do not think Green Bay or really anyone is going to be able to totally bottle it up when it comes to Philadelphia's ground game. But if you have your two athletic freaks out there in Quay Walker and Edgerrin Cooper, it can go a long way. And I like the contributions that Eric Wilson, the veteran, has made at linebacker this year. Isaiah McDuffie has sort of gone from a very elevated, prominent role to decreased snaps by the week to back up as injuries pop up. Isaiah McDuffie, you get a hat tip. But if Quay Walker's back on Sunday, it better be Walker and Cooper as the 1-2 punch at inside linebacker for Green Bay. You have to match athleticism with athleticism here. The reason they drafted Quay Walker and the reason they drafted Edgerrin Cooper is because they are athletic freaks, athletic marvels. This is a matchup where you want those guys as your inside linebackers. Those guys that you can send on a blitz. Those guys that can shoot the gaps and try to hold Saquon down for a 2 or 3 yard carry from time to time, because I'm telling you, it's going to be difficult for Green Bay's rush defense. A rush defense that I have been thoroughly impressed with throughout the season. But I think one big kicker in this one on Sunday, matchups can dictate a lot of what happens. Eric Wilson, you'd like him in some other matchups. If Quay Walker can get out there on Sunday for Green Bay and you can have a 1-2 punch of he and Edgerrin Cooper, I think it increases Green Bay's chances, defensively certainly, to try to just keep things in front of them when Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley are trying to bust out big runs. Because again, no team, you know what Philadelphia is going to do, with or without Hurts. No team averaged fewer pass attempts per game. No team averaged more rush attempts per game. And what makes that number, or those two numbers, so scary is that they have A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, two really, really good receivers. A.J. Brown missed some time this year, still went over 1,000 yards. Devonta Smith, I think, had over 60 catches for over 800 yards, a good amount of touchdowns. I want to say 7 or 8 it was this year. They have a really solid 1-2 punch at wide receiver. Flat out, it's just a loaded offense. It is. It's just an absolutely loaded offense for Philadelphia. And it's a team that, yes, will lean on the ground game, but when they need to throw, they have two pretty good weapons on the outside to attack with. It is Mitch. I am on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Packers, Eagles, final thoughts. Not going to be repetitive in this video. If you haven't watched the other ones that I've had this week, go back and watch those. It's different layers to the matchup, looking at how Green Bay can beat the Eagles, and then we did a first look or a first glance at the matchup. Green Bay, sticking with the defensive side here real quick again, they have to find a way to get pressure on Jalen Hurts. They just have to. And this year under Jeff Hafley, they typically don't blitz, and they'll want to contain Hurts like they did in week 1 in Brazil. But if it isn't working rushing 4, I suspect it won't. I have my doubts about that, both from Green Bay's vantage point of the pass rush has been MIA for large chunks of the season when they choose to rush 4. Rashawn Gary, the leader in the clubhouse, with 7.5 sacks, was voted a Pro Bowler. Many people were like, it wasn't a typical Pro Bowl type year, but Rashawn Gary gets in, 7.5 sacks. He underwhelmed at times. Lucas Van Ness, a disappearing act for most of the season. Kingsley Enagbari showed flashes. I thought Brenton Cox, once Preston Smith was traded, was pretty damn good. And then on the interior, Devontae Wyatt was good at the start of the year, got hurt, sort of trailed off. We see glimpses of him as well. TJ Slayton, Kenny Clark. Kenny Clark had arguably his quietest year as a Green Bay Packer. And that's a lot of years. The former first-round pick out of UCLA. And I think this game, containing Jalen Hurts won't be enough. If he has all day to throw when they do pass it, it's going to be a recipe for disaster for Green Bay's defense. You have to find a way to manufacture pressure on Jalen Hurts. Now, doing that consistently against Philadelphia's offensive line seems unrealistic. Basically, what I'm hinting at is Green Bay's probably going to have to blitz more than they typically have so far this year. Because if Sunday comes and goes, and Jalen Hurts has all day in the pocket to throw, and he's just picking apart the Packers' secondary to no fault of the secondary, but because he has an eternity of time in the pocket, and the pass rush isn't getting to number one for Philadelphia, I'm going to be pulling my hair out. I'm sure many of you are as well. You have to go down swinging in this game, especially defensively. You just have to. Don't let Hurts pick things apart in the pocket. I think one of the most frustrating things in the 2 losses to the Minnesota Vikings for Green Bay was they let Sam Darnold just basically set up shop, have a picnic in the pocket, and had all day to throw. In that first matchup in Green Bay, Minnesota gets up 28-0. Green Bay had no pressure on Darnold through 30 minutes. And then in the second half, they started dialing up the blitz a hell of a lot more than they did in the first half against the Vikings, and it hit home a couple of times, and they picked Darnold off a couple of times. But it was too little too late. They end up losing 31-29. Look at how Darnold was when he faced the blitz against Detroit. Aaron Glenn said, we're down a lot of guys. They have Justin Jefferson. They have Jordan Addison. We get it. Week 18, Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator for Detroit, said, I don't give a damn. I'm going to trust my guys. Blitz Darnold like crazy. Minnesota had 9 points. Couldn't do anything in the red zone. Darnold pressured left and right. His eyes just wandering, darting around left and right, start to finish in that game. It'll be tough to do that against Jalen Hurts. He's far more mobile than a guy like Sam Darnold. My point is we have seen too many times this year, if there is one thing to nitpick about this defense, it's the lack of the pass rush when they rush 4. If it doesn't work early, you can't keep kicking and beating the dead horse by rushing 4 repeatedly and giving Jalen Hurts all day to throw. It's not going to work. And so if blitzing more leads to 1 or 2 plays where Hurts can extend outside the pocket anyways and run for 10 or 11 yards, I'm fine with that. Because the premise for me, again, is go down swinging. Bring the pressure. My biggest fear defensively for Green Bay, outside of trying to contain all these weapons or finding a path to success, is I do fear, and we saw it on a couple of play calls late in the game against Chicago last week for the defense. My fear is that Green Bay rushes 4, it doesn't get home. Hurts picks them apart in the passing game. They pick them apart in the ground game. And Green Bay just keeps rushing 4 throughout the game, and it's easy pickings for Philadelphia's offense. That's my big concern for the defense in this game, and I want to be wrong. I'm assuming, and I suspect, bringing 4 isn't going to do it against that offensive line. Figure something out if that's the case. Don't sit back and just keep repeatedly doing the same thing. Mitch, I'm on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Packers, Eagles, final thoughts. Flip side, the defense under Vic Fangio for Philadelphia has been really good. I mean, point blank, matter of fact. I mentioned in a video earlier this week, the Eagles don't blitz much. 27th in the NFL in blitz percentage, which is good for Jordan Love because he has struggled, or did at least for the first 9-10 weeks of the season when facing the blitz. What's bad for Jordan Love and the Packers is that Philadelphia has allowed less than 21 points in 8 of its last 9. Vic Fangio's defense, the youngest defense in the National Football League, they're grooving. They are riding an emotional and a mental high into this playoff game on Sunday, whereas Green Bay is kind of limping in physically. Watson out, Love with the elbow, was a limited participant in practice on Wednesday. I'm assuming he'll be good to go. But you've got a couple of those injuries banged up. Romeo Doubs missed last week with an illness. Now sounds like he's okay. Philadelphia, meanwhile, got to rest most of their guys, not because of injury, outside of Jalen Hurts, right? And now they're ready to go. Again, held opponents to less than 21 points in 8 of its last 9. And you may ask, well, come on. Who did those games come against? 3 of them were against Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. Philly beat the Ravens in Baltimore earlier this year. Jaden Daniels and the Commanders. Matt Stafford and the Rams. Now, they did give up 36 to Jaden Daniels and the Commanders the second time around, but in that first matchup, bottled him and the offense up, held them to 18 points. Again, 21, less than that. Have they held their opponents to less than 21 points 8 of its last 9 games of Vic Fangio's defense? They've been phenomenal. And it's not all against bottom feeders. Lamar Jackson, Matt Stafford in that game did have Cooper Kupp, did have Puka Nacua, who both, if you look at the stats, kind of feasted, but only scored 20 points. And then Jaden Daniels and the Commanders held to 18. Green Bay has scored 25-plus in the last 6 games Jordan Love has started and completed. So one of those, something has to give. And you feel like, and you hate to say it, going into this matchup, that the Philadelphia defense is probably a little bit more confident in its process, in its blueprint, than Green Bay's offense is in its. Now, Green Bay, you're going to have to lean on Josh Jacobs. We all know that. But the passing game's going to have to do something. And without Christian Watson to stretch the field, that's a big miss, not having number 9 out there. And we've seen the inconsistencies in sort of the roller coaster ride this passing game has taken in the last few weeks for the Packers. Can they put it together? Can they figure it out in this one? Don't know. We'll have to see. And one huge element, I think I mentioned this in a previous video this week, getting Josh Jacobs going to open up the passing game is absolutely critical for the Packers. Because not only were teams unable to beat Philly deep this year, they didn't even try. Philadelphia is first. They gave up the least amount of explosive pass plays, 20-plus yards this year. And like I said, the opposition didn't even try. Opposing quarterbacks averaged 6 yards per pass attempt against the Eagles, by far the lowest mark in the NFL. Again, I like saying stats 2 times sometimes to really add home the emphasis. Opposing quarterbacks averaged 6 yards per pass attempt against Philadelphia this year, by far the lowest mark in the NFL. They don't get beat deep. Teams don't even try to beat them deep. And so for Green Bay, maybe it is a lot of crossers, jet motion, orbit motion, short passes, get it out of Love's hands quickly, although I trust this offensive line. And Philly, Philadelphia's 13th in sacks, and they don't blitz. I think we all trust this offensive line for Green Bay. Having more time in the pocket could be key for Jordan Love, obviously is a key. But teams aren't necessarily not throwing it deep on Philly because they don't have time. Again, 13th in sacks, they don't really blitz. And their pressure numbers on QBs this year are good, but not great. It's not elite. Jordan Love should have time on Sunday when Green Bay goes to the passing game. We trust the offense, at least I trust the offensive line for the Packers. Philadelphia, not a team that gets home. It's like a league average mark. The difficulty is finding those slots, those holes on the second and third levels of that defense when you do go to throw. Because sometimes you watch Philadelphia's secondary and their defense, it feels like it's 11 on 15. It feels like they've got 4 extra guys out there on defense. That's how good, that's how elite the pass defense, and really the defense as a whole, has been for Philadelphia. They are number 1 in total yards allowed per game defensively and number 3 in scoring. 17.6, I think it is, per pop. They don't give up points. They don't give up yards. You'll get time to throw, but good luck trying to find someone. That's where the creativity for Matt LaFleur, that's where, knowing the Eagles have the youngest defense in the NFL, try to keep them on their toes. I said in a video earlier this week, constant motion. Green Bay loves doing pre-snap motion. That won't be anything out of the norm for them if they go to that well over and over again. I think they'll have to go to that well over and over again in Philadelphia to try to find means of success. They're not invincible, they're not unbeatable, but they are really, really good offensively, and they don't get away from their bread and butter, and they're really, really good defensively, and Vic Fangio trusts his guys on the back end to lock things up when their front can't get pressure on the opposing quarterback. Jordan Love should have time on Sunday. It's can they capitalize, can they take advantage of that? Can Josh Jacobs get going early to maybe get those safeties to creep up and you can take a shot to Jaden Reed or Bo Melton down the field? That chess match is going to be fascinating to watch. Really, really fascinating to watch. Mitch, I'm on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Packers, Eagles, final thoughts. You know what else just needs to be monitored, and it's pretty simplistic? Health. Health is wealth at this time of the year. Look at Philadelphia. Assuming they get Jalen Hurts back, they should be good to go. They should have, I think, all of their starters or their normal starters, or just about all of them, good to go. Thumbs up for this game against the Packers. Packers have question marks at a couple of spots. Obviously, don't have Jair Alexander. Obviously, don't have Christian Watson. I'm looking defensively. I mentioned the name Quay Walker. Evan freaking Williams, the rookie safety out of Oregon, having him back, if he's able to get back, will be massive. It's a major factor for the Green Bay defense. If Evan Williams is back, you can move Javon Bullard to the slot. You can keep Keyshawn Nixon on the outside. If Evan Williams is out and Zane Anderson's out, you've got to put Bullard, the second-round pick out of Georgia, at safety. That has not proven to be very fruitful this year for Green Bay. Now, could Bullard grow into that role as the years go on? Of course. I'm not going to give up on the guy as a true safety after one season as a second-round pick. But the closer he's been to the ball, and I'm talking about when he plays at the slot, is where he seems to excel. And so the chain reaction it will have, either having Evan Williams in the lineup or not, will be just huge for Green Bay. Health is wealth. If you can get Quay Walker, if you can get Evan Williams, I'm not going to answer the question of, well, if they could only have one of the two back, which would you prefer? Not going to answer that. Get them both back, hopefully. And hopefully they're good to go. They're cleared. You have no reservations, no doubts that they'll be all right out there on the field for the Packers. I think Evan Williams and Quay Walker and their availability is massive in this one because Philly's good to go. And for Green Bay, we've seen what it looks like when they've slotted Evan Williams in as the starting safety next to Xavier McKinney and what it looks like without him. And I thought Zane Anderson, when he got that start, was it against New Orleans? Pretty damn good, pretty admirable. Then he went out. And Bullard has just shown he's better in the slot than he is at safety. And that is a huge, huge, huge factor in this one in the lead-up. Do you have Evan Williams? Do you have Quay Walker? Evan Williams didn't start at safety next to Xavier McKinney against Philadelphia week 1. I don't even think Evan Williams played a snap. Edgerrin Cooper was out there for 10 or 11 snaps, I think it was, week 1 against the Eagles. Those are two big guys that you need. And then Quay Walker was not really a huge factor on the defense the first 8, 9, 10 weeks. And then something happened. The light bulb went off, and he started to kick it into gear and had a phenomenal 3-week stretch for the Packers. Then he goes down, and he's been out. Getting those guys back, Walker, Evan Williams, would be massive for the Packers. Definitely monitor their statuses throughout the week. Should be interesting. Thinking about going live for the first half on Sunday with live play-by-play and reaction. We'll have to see. And then hopefully we're talking about a Packers win. 4.5-point spread. I believe it is the largest spread in the NFC games. Not overall on Wild Card Weekend because Buffalo's a 9-point favorite over Denver. But at last check, Philly's a 4.5-point favorite. Tampa's a 3.5-point favorite. And Minnesota's a 2.5-point favorite last I looked on the road against the Rams. But 4.5, it's not 7, it's not 8. It's certainly doable if you're tracking what the odds makers are thinking. A lot of keys in this one for Green Bay. I will feel more confident, way more confident than I do now if they get Quay Walker and Evan Williams back. And hopefully we come on Sunday and we're talking about a Green Bay defense that played with their hair on fire, were aggressive, blitzed when they needed to, didn't sit back and just get picked apart and roll over in what could be their final game of the season. Hopefully we're talking about a defense that emptied the tank, an offense that figured it out in the passing game. Josh Jacobs helped by opening it up with the running game, and Green Bay's advancing to take on Detroit. We'll have to see. It is Mitch. I'm on YouTube again. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Always appreciate all the support. We'll see you next time.